Hey guys, I think we're live. We'll see. People are here. Hey y'all. Thank you guys. We'll wait a second to let people join us while I grab our guest. You guys, so I'm having Rachel Ricketts on, someone who we are extremely lucky to listen to, and her book, Do Better, is something that I needed more than I could even explain, and I think we all need. Let me see. And then also just in seeing the comments, you guys, hey, like, what we need to do is really, really like be conscious of and like super respectful of the people that come on here to kind of help educate us, because they don't need to do that. How do I do this? You guys know that I don't know how to do this stuff. There it is. Okay, there she is. Send a request. I think I sent a request. But yeah, you guys, what we're gonna basically talk about this unbelievable book that oh my God. Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm so well. How are you?
It's good to see your face.
I know.
And not just hear your voice.
I know.
I need
Y'all,
to
we
turn.
talked for like a few hours yesterday, so Colton and I are just
Yeah. But it was more like, it was more me having like, I don't know, like mental breakdowns essentially. So.
Well, not just you. I mean,
yeah, no, I mean,
tis the season, truly.
I mean, look, if it's a constant thing, but my struggles and things like that have no, I guess, place whenever we're talking about certain things like this. So what I have to do is I have to compartmentalize and say,
Well, you don't. So we're gonna talk about that more. But first, can you just show me your nails today? Because I haven't.
oh,
The same.
they're so I bite all my cuticles, but they're like green with smiley faces. Yeah.
Love it. I'm just giving.
Went with a little gel application. What are yours?
Oh, they're just like
okay.
the natural. We're keeping in food.
I'm
excited to be here.
I'm just happy to like actually get on here and like try to like soak up at least some of the wisdom from like this. You guys, like, this isn't just a, hey, let's come on to Colton's live and like ask him if we're doing like a Teen Wolf season 7 or no, like, I mean, and it really is something that like sidebar, like I was telling people as you were coming on, is like I have the opportunity to like talk to people that I genuinely respect and that we all can learn from. And in the past, by talking to people or having people on to do takeovers, what they do is say, I don't know, and just belittle everyone that comes on. And they go, oh my God, you're amazing, Colton. Thank you for doing this. Instead of realizing that that's disrespectful to the people I'm having on, because they should be sending their praise and comments to you. But anyway, I guess we'll get into all that later. But
we will.
Yeah, and I just wanted to like, I really wanted to like help, or just needed to dive more into this book, because there's so many things that I related to when I was reading it. But at the same time, we were talking yesterday how I had to constantly remind myself to go, oh, like, this isn't my story. I'm reading your story, and my struggles are nowhere near the same thing as yours. So all that being said.
But at the same time, the part of the work that I think is really important is honoring all of our pain and all of our trauma, right? Not equally per se, but like that we can never actually create collective change unless we are being mindful of the pain and the trauma and the like healing work that is required for all of us. So that's really like what this book is about, that if we ignored that piece, like that's to me really where the division comes from and where the defense comes from, when people are like, well, you're talking about these people, but what about me? And so we need to have an understanding of like what our power and privilege is, but also that like everyone's pain does matter.
Yeah.
That really does matter, because if we're not tending to the pain of everybody, then we aren't going to be able to move forward really in a collective way and have healing and liberation for all. So it does matter.
Yeah.
And those who've been made most marginalized, who like rarely ever have their pain acknowledged, let alone addressed or remedied, we have a right to express ourselves and our experience and our pain and our trauma, and have that acknowledged and rectified.
Yeah.
First.
And you know, should be given platforms where you would be visible, as opposed to
right.
You know, and as opposed to just constantly telling or helping other people, and not getting your pain acknowledged or you know, heard.
Totally.
So,
totally.
Can you hear that my AC?
A little bit, but like
I need to turn it off. Hold on.
Well,
I'm gonna bring on a journey.
Don't you know, don't sweat yourself away.
No, I literally was going like, okay, let's make sure that my cat doesn't scream this entire time, but I think he's sleeping.
Well, so one of my questions for you was going to be like, oh, he's sleeping, okay? Because, you know, if Timothy needs to come on,
no,
I'm here for that.
He literally, yeah, he hates me, and it's fine.
So, but we love him.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to dive us into this chapter, but before I do that, I'm just going to ground us and everyone who's here. Thank you, everyone who's here. We appreciate you being here and listening to this conversation. And just a moment for us to like take a breath and center wherever we are. There's folks who are all around the world, so it's like a different time of day for so many different folks, but so maybe people at the end of their day or the beginning of their day, the middle of their day, and like a lot of stuff has gone on or is going on. And we know that this is a time of really great grief for people individually and collectively. Like, this is a challenging time. We're all still in the middle of a pandemic. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of anxiety. So let's just acknowledge that. And also, we are going to have a conversation today that will, without question, make some people feel uncomfortable. There's going to be discomfort that arises. And so let's just name that. And know that it's okay if some of the things that I share, that Colton shares, if folks feel some sense of uncomfort or discomfort in that conversation, that's okay. We just invite you to expand your capacity or tolerance for being with that discomfort, and know that we invite you to sort of be with that instead of being reactive or reactionary about it, because this is not a space where we're going to tolerate harm. But knowing that it's okay if you feel overwhelmed, if there's like things that we're talking about, you're not quite sure what it is we're talking about, that's also okay. It's okay if you don't know. And it's okay if there's terms that we're saying that you are unfamiliar with, like that's also totally okay. It's okay to feel uncomfortable or to feel overwhelmed or feel out of your depths. Like, that is fine. That's an entry point for learning and for doing better, which is the title of the book.
Go to rachelricketts.com or really anywhere online.
Yes. The link in my bio. It's on my website, www.rachelricketts.com. So I'm going to dive us into chapter 6, which is on getting spiritually activated. And this
page 113, I think, you guys. Sorry.
Okay. Yes, on 113. And this is really about, this is sort of the crux of the work that I do, which is around what I was just talking about, which is like that for us to create collective change, for us to support in shifting systems of oppression that we all live under and in, it requires us to do some inner work, some inner healing, to address some of our trauma, to really look at the ways in which we have been harmed, look at the ways in which we cause harm, and do so in a way that is embodied and heart-centered and allows us to have compassion for that process. So these are hard questions to get into and to ask ourselves, and hard work to do. And so I like to do this in a way that supports us in feeling connected to ourselves and connected to each other and connected to something bigger than us, however that manifests for folks. My spirituality is secular, so it's not in any specific faith or religion, but for some folks it is, and that's totally fine. But something that's larger than us, nature, the universe, stars, that really helps root us in like this really challenging work, because this is really challenging work. So let's dive in. There's 5 prompts that I have for getting spiritually activated, and Colton, you and I can just chit-chatty on these. So the first one is embracing vulnerability. So step 1 to any of this work is really having a desire and capacity to be vulnerable with ourselves, so that we can also be vulnerable with others, because this is challenging stuff. This is like how we can address harm out in the world, in ourselves. Harm that we've experienced, harm that we've caused other people, requires us to be vulnerable, and vulnerability is very scary, and not something that many of us are practiced around or in. Something that we probably learned how to not be vulnerable in our households growing up. Generationally, that's what a lot of our parents learned. So I'm just going to quickly define vulnerability, and then we can jam out on this a little bit. So vulnerability is the quality or state of being susceptible to physical, mental, or emotional harm, degradation, or destruction. As author Brene Brown shares, it is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. So Colton, you're being vulnerable in this live, as am I.
I'm trying.
For one. And so in the book, I lay out a whole bunch of prompts for each of these precursors to getting spiritually activated. So Colton, I'm going to ask you one of these.
Yeah.
What prevents you from getting vulnerable?
I found myself, like, without answering these questions at the times that we talked about this, I think I spent most of my life being like, I'm an extremely vulnerable person. And by whether that be being open about my own struggles with addiction, mental health, growing up in, very, very, very poor situations. But what I'm starting to realize is like, now I'm going, oh, was I just like subconsciously using all of my grief and my pain to essentially get what I want and what I've gotten in my life? And if you kind of put it all together in a map, it kind of all signs point to yes. So in a way, like, I'm able to weaponize my vulnerability to get what I want. And so yes, and like, I'm able to be vulnerable, but yeah, it's that mental gymnastics that we were talking about yesterday. It's like,
one of the things that I learned, I think I talk about this in the book, is the difference between being open and being vulnerable, which I didn't learn about till, I don't know, in my late 20s, when I thought I was super vulnerable all the time. I was like, I'm such a vulnerable person. I can talk about whatever. I share my blah, blah, blah. But I was actually being open, but I wasn't being vulnerable. I still had a wall up. There was still like, whether I was, most of it was unconscious, but still things I was trying to get out of what it was I was sharing. Or like in a lot of my intimate relationships, I thought I was super vulnerable because I was so open, but I wasn't vulnerable. I still had this massive block around actually really allowing people in, really allowing like intimacy, because it's terrifying.
I'm incapable
so that's
of
like
that. When it comes to like intimacy and things like that, like, I have a wall the size of, it's just constantly there. But it's also with life changes I made a couple of years ago to like actually be present in my life and not use things to numb the pain, I guess, and actually trying to feel the pain. I literally go, oh, I know who I am. And I'm like, I don't fucking know who I am anymore. So it's just the constant battle. But yeah, so I definitely think in some ways I'm open, but I'm still learning to be vulnerable.
Yeah. And it's hard, and it's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Oh,
okay. One of the affirmations I have around this section, because it's so hard,
Mm-hmm.
is I am ready, able, and willing to get more comfortable with my discomfort. I surrender, I surrender, I surrender. So for anyone who's watching that is noting that, some folks are saying they're noting that distinction between being open and being vulnerable, just supporting yourself with that affirmation can be helpful. Yeah. Step number 2 to getting spiritually activated is getting honest. So this is a big one. Like this is, I mean, all of these are big, but
Yeah.
really like really taking stock again of like how, where we fall on the spectrum of power and privilege, and really honest about the harms that we have caused ourselves, the harms that we have caused other people, the harms that have been trespassed against us, especially harms towards folks who have been made most marginalized. So this piece, I see a lot of folks who like really genuinely want to commit to justice, to being good folks and making change. But if we can't get really honest with ourselves about like the harms that we have caused and how we have or have not addressed that, then we are just perpetuating more systems of harm. So one of the prompts here, here's a big one for you, Colton. How have I harmed myself or others because of white supremacy? And it's probably both.
Oh yeah. I mean, it really like going through your life being like blinded by whiteness is something that I don't think people, people are quick to just, oh, what, do that stupid like all white people aren't racist thing, which is not true. And so I've harmed myself in a way. I have been constantly growing up before I moved to a mostly white town. I was always like seeking out and wanting to be friends with other communities that were othered, because
right.
So what that is like, okay, what I then did was think I was doing the work this whole time, because my whole life I have had Black friends, friends who were in communities of, Asian communities, trans communities, things like that. And so, but that actually just having those friends doesn't mean like you're actually doing the work. So I've been harmful in a way where realizing that being in proximity, and here you're seeing me like trying to put it all together, because being in proximity to people who, just because I have struggles of my own doesn't mean that because I'm around these people and I just relate on so many different levels, it does not mean that they should this is something we talked about yesterday. It's like trying to figure out, I mean, just, trying to understand that my struggles and things like that have no place in it's not about comparing. It basically is like, if I'm going to take from my friends and communities of color and Black communities, style, language that people use online, like yes, honey, yes, queen, slay, blah, blah, whatever, XYZ, it's really harmful. And so what I'm trying to do is like be mindful of that and not not perpetuate that, and not continue to take because of my horrible privilege. So
yeah, and so thank you for that.
I don't even know if I said, I literally, all I heard was like literally just
no, you said a lot. You said
mental
a lot.
gymnastics. Yeah.
Well, it's really hard. It's really hard to be in the reflection of these massive systems of harm, right? And the ways in which it's really hard for us to be with the ways in which we have caused harm to other people, especially people who've been made most marginalized. I am cisgender, light-skinned, financially secure, thin, person,
Yeah.
non-disabled person who has like a lot of power and privilege, and I'm a Black queer woman, so I also
Yeah.
don't have a lot of privilege. So it's important for me to have an understanding of like where I fall on the spectrum, and
Mm-hmm.
also knowing that like having privilege in and of itself is not bad. It's what we do with the privilege that matters. Like
It's not continuing
acknowledging that
to.
we have it, and then what are we doing with that privilege to help create and ensure that there is more equity, liberation, and healing for the folks who don't have it. Because privilege is something that is, again, created by systems of oppression. They're not God-given. It's not anyone's right or any of the above, but we all live in systems of harm. And so how are we like addressing these systems and the privileges that we have within them?
And yeah, just recognizing it and like not continuing to just like use it in your favor, which I
Yeah,
mean, being
yeah,
a being a white gay man who is able or has learned how to not present as a gay man for
right,
the sake of my career,
right.
and then to realize that in a way now by presenting that way in the public and having to, you know, or not having to, choosing to go into a career where I then stifle my, let's just use the word gayness, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah,
What that does is what I'm realizing, which has been something that has been, you know, of course it's painful to realize that what that shows the rest of the world is, okay, well, I can't be a part of that Hollywood community. I can't be part of that community because I can't I can't pretend to be straight, if that makes sense.
yeah.
And that's, yeah, anyway, that's a different story.
Well, it's not actually, because to me, that's actually part of how white supremacy has harmed you.
Yeah.
Because white supremacy is also heteropatriarchy, as like capitalism and colorism and ableism and all of those other things. And so when you feel like you need to be more part of the status quo, which is to hide your sexual identity, like your sexual identity or sexual orientation, or to choose to pass,
Yeah.
is harmful to you. And because of your privileges, you can do that. It's
And
both and.
yeah.
It's both and. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, yeah, so it's, yeah.
Okay. We're getting to some juicy ones. So number 3, that was getting honest. Number 3, acknowledging your anger. So anger is a strong feeling of displeasure, annoyance, or hostility, often resulting from some way we feel we've been treated unkindly or unfairly. And I talk about this throughout the book, but anger and rage have really bad raps. Like, we, under our systems of repression, just immediately presume that anger or rage means violence. It's automatically negative, and it's harmful. And that, to me, is just absolutely not the case. It's what we do with our anger that matters. Just because we are in a state of anger doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with us or that we don't have a right to the anger that we have. Like, look at what's going on in the world. I mean, we're in a global health pandemic right now with absolutely disproportionate results and impacts and deaths around the world. And there's a lot of stuff in the world that we have every right to be angry about. There's a lot of oppression. There's a lot of system of harm. There's a lot of, there's just a lot of fuck shit, as I like to call it. And so we have every right to be angry about the injustices, about the inequities, about, I just saw this morning, the Pope said that he would not be acknowledging gay relationships,
I
LGBTQ
didn't even,
plus relationships,
yeah.
And in London and Australia, we are having massive uprisings from women who are being constantly and continuously, murdered, kidnapped, raped, assaulted, violated, especially people who belong to further marginalized identities. So like, especially Black and Indigenous women and femmes.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot to be angry about, and we can use that anger to move us into action. And we really rob ourselves when we don't allow ourselves the right to our anger. Like, if we don't allow ourselves the right to our anger, then that anger bottles up and it comes out somewhere. You want to wonder why so many men, a lot of times men's predominant socially acceptable emotion is anger. And that's it. You're not allowed to be vulnerable. You're not allowed to be sad. You're not allowed to grieve. You're not allowed to be caring or kind. Like, just anger. Like, that's what white supremacist heteropatriarchy says is acceptable. And if that's the only acceptable emotion, then that's the only one you're going to show. And if that's the only acceptable emotion you're allowed to show, you're not allowed to be a full human. It robs you of being of full humanity. And then especially for women and femmes, we're not allowed to be angry. We're supposed to be docile and quiet and meek and feminine and like subservient. And so we're not allowed to be angry about all of the awful things that are happening in the world. It's harmful for everybody. And then it doesn't allow us to be humans in our fullness. And then it doesn't allow us to utilize that anger as information. Because when we're angry, it means like a boundary has been violated or an injustice has been served. And that's like, we have every right to know about that, whether it's towards us or others, right? That's like important information for us to have. So our relationship with anger, sorry, go ahead.
There's something I wanted to just, can you say that part about in the book where you said something about the poll that, I'm getting it a little wrong, the poll that shows that most Americans think that Black people don't feel the same pain. There was a part in
it's the racial empathy gap. So when I talk about inheriting trauma and medical racism in the book, when I talk about my experience supporting my mom die,
that was the hardest.
And so there's a very well studied and documented racial empathy gap that says that reports that the majority of white Americans from young, like they've done this in children, believe that Black people experience less pain. And that's the vestige of our enslavement. That's the vestige of anti-Blackness that's global. Yeah, the racial empathy gap. So for example, a lot of Black women die in our rate of death in or because of childbirth and child rearing is 3 to 4 times higher Black women than white women, irrespective of class, education. Like Serena Williams almost died giving birth to her baby. Okay. In New York City, it's 12 times higher. 12 times higher than white women. And part of that is we just don't receive the same care. And part of that is like, we're not believed and our pain isn't believed. Which was also the experience I had with my mother. We were trying to keep her out of pain. She had primary progressive MS and her pain was not believed. So she wasn't getting sufficient pain medication because there's a racial empathy gap. It's just like, no, you're a mule. You're not really human.
Having to beg,
consciously, of course, this is
having to beg doctors to let me kill my mother or please kill my mother to save her from some pain. And so yeah, you know, there's a lot to be angry about, and our relationship with anger is a really important one, I think, for again, being able to be full humans, and also for being able to do the work that's required for justice, for collective liberation, for healing. Okay, so a prompt around anger. How does it make me feel when others express their anger? I guess like anger towards me, or just anger in general. I mean, I think
let's say towards you.
When you see, well, I guess I'm learning and have been learning the last couple of years to obviously understand that most of the time it's very warranted, and it doesn't make me feel good, because where I don't go out of my way to cause pain on people, there are like subliminal ways of like not setting boundaries for myself, and like not allowing like saying saying yes all to a family member or something, like, or just saying I'll do this, I'll do that, and then not following through, or not constantly being available to not setting boundaries, and then being mad at someone whenever they cross them, even though I opened the gate in the first place.
I relate to this.
So yeah, I mean, you can't be mad at someone. Here I am literally forgetting the fucking question. No, like it really is something where you go.
I was asking how it makes you feel when others express their anger,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I'm gonna switch it and I'm gonna ask you a new question, which is how have people in my life responded to my anger?
Oh man. There's so many different ways of like kind of communicating this. And I think for me specifically, I'm not speaking for anybody else, um, in trying to make myself as invisible as possible, finally um, like shouting or like finally having a breaking point
Mm-hmm.
and everyone's reaction thinking that it's me being dramatic because I'm an actor, because I literally say words in front of a camera on teen television shows that I don't that I'm being dramatic. But at the same time, it is that thing of like, okay, yeah, it definitely it doesn't make me feel good to be constantly reminded that I don't that my problems like don't matter, but they matter in a specific thing apart from other people's problems, and that's something that I have to understand that I can't exploit. So
Yeah, and I can relate to that. Not um, setting boundaries and then getting mad at people when they cross them,
classic.
or not vocalizing my emotions and then it
Yeah.
builds up. And then when I do vocalize it, it's like ragey.
Oh, it's like
Um,
violent. Yeah,
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 it's violent. It's violent.
yeah.
And so that's like work that I am doing to
Mhm.
really, and to, I'd like to have compassion for myself in that process, because I know part of that is also like trauma responses to things,
Yeah,
but also I'm a 36-year-old woman, you know, and I have access to therapy and healing and support, and so it's my work to make sure that I'm doing better,
yeah,
so that I can communicate nonviolently. But I will also say, as a queer Black woman, like people constantly think I'm angry. Like there'll be people who are listening right now who just think I'm angry because I'm having conversation about things that are hard to make them uncomfortable. So that's also really challenging for me,
yeah.
because I constantly have to be like, how can I say this or shape this in a way that won't automatically be presumed to be me being angry, even if I'm not. And then when I actually am, I mean,
Well, then it's
well,
like, I mean, then, I mean, why should you, be angry? You're having to like constantly explain things that you spent the fucking time to put in a fucking book.
yeah.
And then you're having to like come onto platforms like this and then like, you know, uh, give pieces of your soul to people who aren't fucking listening, essentially is what it is. But
Yeah. Yeah,
anyway,
it is anger making. Thank you for that.
yeah.
It's true. Okay, we're almost there. Have integrity is number 4. Um, so integrity is the personal choice to hold oneself to consistent standards.
Mm.
And um, there's just a lot of performative fuck shit going on out in the world. We've seen a larger uptick of this,
Yeah.
Following June 2020 and the latest uprising in support of Black lives. And so, an important piece to getting honest with ourselves, being embodied in ourselves so that we can be embodied and honest in the work and do that in a really compassionate and effective and like authentic way, is to make sure that we are having integrity with ourselves and with this process. So what am I going to ask you here? Here's a big one for you.
What is she gonna ask?
Why am I addressing my racism? Why? I love your face. Like,
Well,
court, why the fuck wouldn't I?
well, it's gotten to a point where it's so painful. Like it's genuinely so painful that to watch people that you love and that you genuinely care about, that you have learned like so much from, and to just watch what's happening. And it's also, it really is just something like it's painful. It's extremely painful. And you know uh, wanting to finally say, look, I'm not coming on here to, like we talked about this, like America's Next Top White Ally is not a title that I think that we should run around trying to like achieve. And in this, at the same time, like if me coming on here and being like, hey, like, I'm not perfect. I have made many, many public mistakes when it comes to my arrogance, my ignorance, not, you know, and what I'm now able to do is say, okay, I have done these things including racially insensitive Halloween costumes, because growing up, when you believe that if your family and the people around you tell you, and you believe them whenever your family says that you're not racist because your mom dates black guys and because all of your friends are black, um, the harm that causes, and you do address that in this book, is what realistically, what is the difference like between me running around with a torch? I mean,
Right.
there are different ways that it harms, and yeah, basically me going around like, now what I'm doing, what I said I was going to try not to do, is just like going around the question.
No, you aren't. It's okay.
Yeah.
These are really, there's no one way to answer these. These are
Yeah.
so complicated and there's so many layers to them. But what I really appreciate, because what I'm hearing you say is, which is what I talk about in this book a lot, is like, because you understand, because you are appreciative of, I'm hearing two things. One,
Yeah.
because you have an understanding of your own white privilege and the ways in which you perpetuate harm, and it causes you pain to A, witness people that you know and love be in pain,
Yeah.
that you benefit from and perpetuate, and also causes you pain to know that you are causing other people pain,
Yeah.
people that you love and people that you don't love, people that you know and people that you don't know. Like, that's not how you want to show up in the world, as being someone who is okay with that
And even if
system
it's
way of being, right?
subconscious, like even
And most of it is.
if you're
Most of
doing
it's
things
totally unconscious. You're doing
without
things with
trying,
no idea, because that's how privilege works. Cause harm and have no idea that you're even causing harm, because you don't even need to think about it. And like that way of being is just not a way of being that works for you, which is a beautiful thing and necessary. And also, again, like back to the spiritual activism piece
Yeah.
of this, it's like understanding this interconnectedness.
Yeah.
So like, your oppression is my oppression and my oppression is your oppression. Not equally, because you have a lot more power and privilege than me, but we are connected. We are interconnected. And so having that understanding of like, none of us can be well until all of us are well.
Yeah.
That's if COVID has shown us anything, if this global pandemic has absolutely proved anything, it's that is true. So long as one person on this whole planet continues to have COVID-19, the whole globe is at risk. The whole globe. And that's always been this way. Like, all of us are interconnected in this deep, I don't just mean physical, but also energetic and spiritual way. But COVID-19 is showing us that in a major way. So we can't stop ignoring, we can't continue to ignore the people that we don't like to think about, the people that, just make our clothes in Bangladesh. Like, we don't want to think about their livelihoods or their well-being. But we have to. I mean, for me, we always had to. But now, if anything, it's this realization of like, well, I can't be fully safe. The world can't be fully safe. The economy can't be fully safe. Our safety, personally, physically, mentally, emotionally, can't be guaranteed until everyone on this planet can have that guaranteed. Yeah. And we need to start with the people who are being the most oppressed and exploited. Somebody asked the name of the book. So it's Do Better: Spiritual Activism for Fighting and Healing from White Supremacy. And it's a guidebook and a workbook for everybody.
And it really is like, it is something you will be able to really relate to. A lot of the things in this book, it really is for everybody. It's uncomfortable, but I think it's needed. I definitely know it's needed.
Thank you. Okay, the last one, acceptance. That was have integrity. Did I? Yeah.
I'm like playing tricks on you. I'm like answering every fucking question that isn't the fucking question. Literally watching me.
Okay, last one. Acceptance and action. So this is really 2 in 1.
Yeah.
So the last chunk of getting spiritually activated is twofold. It's like, one, we need to have an understanding and acceptance of who we are in this like spectrum of power and privilege, and also all of the stuff that's going on in the world. Listen, this is a really overwhelming time. Like, there's a lot to address. We have a whole global pandemic to address. We have massive systems of inequity. We have a climate crisis that's like really causing friction and is like the larger issue behind the pandemic. We have, you know, just massive systems of white supremacy, patriarchy, of ableism, all of these things. It's a lot. And then all of this is happening while we have just more uncertainty than we have ever dealt with before as a collective, as humans. Like, the amount of uncertainty that we're dealing with, it's really hard. Like I said at the top of this call, like, a lot of us are struggling. We may not even be aware that we're struggling, but we are. Like, none of us, I would say, like, none of us are doing well, especially those of us who have, you know, lived the intersections of marginalized identities. Like, this is a very challenging time.
And then to be the arrogance has only increased because you know, combating you know, telling the truth with and then using arrogance, I think, is kind of what I think the people result to doing in a way to prove that they're not causing harm or doing anything. So
or to not feel or to just not feel. And we live in systems of oppression that want us to be disconnected from the neck up. So we do a lot of this work from up here, or we live up here. We try to solve problems from up here, and we're always avoiding like what's going on in our heart, what's going on in our bodies. And that's what I want this to be, to remind us that we have a right to return to ourselves and to like really address whatever it is that's coming up for us, instead of feeling like we need to stifle it, and without feeling like, you know, like we are wholesomely wrong or bad. Nothing that I'm saying is making anyone wholesomely wrong or bad. It's making systems of oppression wrong or bad. And, you know, it's a problem for folks who want to ignore those systems of oppression and the ways that they belong to them or benefit from them. That's problematic for sure. But I belong to systems of oppression. Like I mentioned, all of my privileges before. And so I'm not, you know, I'm not saying that people are awful or need to be written off or canceled. I am saying that we have work to do, that we all can and really need to do better, because like literally we're not going to continue to survive on the planet if we don't. So that's the real. So acceptance of all that, is, which doesn't mean we just say like, oh, okay, all these systems of oppression exist, so what do you want me to do about it? Like, whatever, it just is what it is. Not at all. It's just like, okay, let's take a real look at the way that the world actually is and all of the things that are happening, and what can I do to do better to help address these systems of harm. It's really easy to get stuck in grief and guilt and shame or in anger, right? Those are not helpful. That doesn't mean we shouldn't to have space to feel those. For sure we should, but like getting stuck there it's not helpful for the person who's stuck in that, and it's not helpful for the movement and for people who've been most marginalized to like keep things moving and actually create equity and change. So acceptance and action. So my question for you, Colton, is going to be, how can I use my mistakes to create change?
Whether it's, you know, there's a list on your website actually of ways, you know, donating, buying books. So for people that could use your message, there's also speaking out, you know, there's a million ways. I mean, getting vulnerable on here. Also calling out shit whenever you're hearing it or seeing it, and actually being supportive to people who are marginalized and to your friends who don't benefit the same way that you do benefit from these systems. And not centering my stories, not centering white stories when we're talking about not centering white people at the forefront of essentially like Black stories. And I think we see that a lot. So not continuing or not trying going forward to be part of that, I think could be helpful. And then just fucking listening. Like, like real, like one of the hardest things that I think, you know, someone who grows up without like rules and then like going like, oh, I can do whatever I want. Like that's not how the world works. Like it's time to grow up, Colton. So
And also
listening.
like, you know, more personally, like you, the mistakes that you have made that you know of, because there's mistakes you've made you don't even know of. That's
Yeah,
true
of
for all
course.
of
Yeah.
us. The
Yeah.
mistakes that you have made that you know of serve as like a real visceral reminder for you, right? If we don't feel like we have, if we're not able to like take stock of the ways in which we've caused harm and made mistakes, then we don't have like a real world example for us to be embodied in like what that looks like or is like, or that we are part of that problem. And so even the example you were saying earlier about like, you know, racially insensitive Halloween costumes,
Yeah.
you know, doing the work to have an understanding of like what that was, why you did it, and what like
Being
what was
able to wash
happening
off. Yeah. Being
for
able to
you.
like just wash off somewhat, like wash something off and then not like have to have the lived experience of what that means and what that could have caused.
Yeah,
Like
or and did
harm.
cause and
And
did cause.
oh,
Yeah,
did and still continues to.
right,
And then doing the thing that, you know, people do that we all that all white people do is like, oh, if I just disappear, it's all gonna go away.
right,
Not it's not gonna harm my well-being. But what it's gonna do is make you die on the inside. I mean,
right,
yeah.
right. So, and being able and voicing those mistakes. So we talked
Yeah.
about this a lot before too
Yeah,
yesterday.
yeah.
One of the major things I hope folks take away from this book, and also just in this work, and irrespective, like, and another big thing to share is like a lot of the stuff that I believe need to do, the inner work that we need to do to help overthrow systems of harm is not just about systems of harm, right? Like
Yeah.
this work, like relating yourself to anger, figuring out like boundaries that you need, having a conversation about vulnerability and where you learn vulnerability and how vulnerability is hard for you, and how we own up to our mistakes and how we learn from our mistakes. Like these are just like, that's just trauma work, that's grief work, that's
Yeah.
healing work that supports all of us to just be better humans to ourselves and to others. So accountability is another huge one
Yeah.
here, and like that is something that we absolutely learn not to do under systems of oppression. We do not take accountability. And so one of the main ways I think I witness you utilize your mistakes as to help create change for others is to own them, to acknowledge them, and to take accountability for them,
Yeah.
which I also do, which is to say like, listen, I fuck up too, here's how I fucked up and here's what I learned from it. And so I can understand I can understand where other people are coming from. I can have some compassion for that process, because I can say like, listen, I'm not perfect, and the goal is not perfection. The goal is absolutely not perfection. The goal is an acknowledgement, an awareness, and to mitigate harm. But perfection is a myth, it's a lie. And a lot of us get really stuck on not doing any work, internal or external, because we were like, oh, so afraid of getting it wrong, which I talk about in the book. And it's like, you are going to get it wrong. Let me just free you from that. You're going to fuck up. I fuck up. Colton fucks up. We're going to fuck up.
Yeah.
But if we aren't at least trying, that's the largest fuck up there is.
You said something about perfection that I like, that fucking blew my mind. It was something, perfection is an agent of oppression. So let us release ourselves from that expectation. That, I mean, everything in this fucking book is relatable. Anyone can relate to it. And this isn't like, we're not on fucking QVC right now. This isn't like everyone for like a simple price.
$4.99.
$4.99. It better not be $4.99.
No.
It better be more. But it's like, if we're just gonna all do what we see everyone else do, like if my place in this, like in this world is to make mistakes and not own up to them and just disappear into thin air behind a fucking black screen that we post whenever people die in front of our faces on TV, if we all do that, then nothing's going to change. And if you really want change, you have to do whatever you can, like being grateful and thankful that you're on here helping my mental breakdowns, and also trying to like give us more insight and writing things like this, and just, I don't know.
All of it. Well, I appreciate you, and I appreciate
you
here. And the book is available everywhere books are sold. It's at your Target, it's at Walmart, it's at Barnes and Noble, it's on Amazon. There's an ebook. It's on Audible or
Yep.
wherever else you get audiobook, I read it, which Colton has been
It,
listening to my
so
voice.
if you read the book first, do whatever you guys want, just fucking read the book. Read the book first and then listen to it. And you say something about being the general, oh my God, what was it? The general of, it's in my phone, I can't look
I
at
think
it.
someone called me the general of loving anger.
In that, you
yeah.
can, the tone, it's, though I caught things by listening to the audiobook after reading that they're both incredible. And I would recommend, obviously not just reading it once, like trying to live by these practices. And going on also, you have these, you have workshops on your website too,
Yes.
which I signed up for. And yeah, you provide more than, more than you can imagine to try to help people fight this pandemic outside of the pandemic, which essentially is the kind of cancer of whiteness.
Yeah. And the acknowledgement that that these systems of harm are all interconnected and hurt all of us, not equally, right? But they harm all of us. So that's really also what we're trying to support folks in understanding here is like, how can we all divest from systems of oppression, carte blanche, that harm each and every one of us? And that won't shift until we are all taking an active role in dismantling them, acknowledging them, addressing them, and dismantling them. And that's a world that we all deserve to be in and live in, a world where we all get to be healed and liberated and free and well. And like, that's not the world that we're living in right now. It's so far.
I think we can all afford to like lose sleep or lose sleep if that means we're gonna lose less lives essentially. So
yeah. And also for us to care for ourselves, because we need to care for ourselves in order for us to do the work that's required out in the world. And like I said, like this is a really challenging time for many of us. So just acknowledging that this also just has like support for us to help ourselves through these challenging moments again, so that we can get out and do the big important work out in the world.
Yeah.
So thanks to everyone. Thank you, Colton, for this conversation, and to everyone who's here or will be here, who will watch in the future. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you for coming on here and your vulnerability, for sharing some of these things that you've gone through in your life in order to help other people. So I'm very, very thankful and grateful for you.
Thank you. Yeah. I will voice note you soon.
Please. And I'll send you pictures of my cat. Photoshop pictures.
To everyone watching, I have virtually claimed Colton's cat as my own, because I don't have my own cat right now, so we virtually share a cat.
Yeah, which it's fine. I would send him, but I don't think I wouldn't want to do that to you.
Okay.
Okay, you guys, and also thank you guys for listening. And I didn't look at a lot of the comments, but you better have fucking been respectful. Okay. I'll talk to you soon.
Well, bye everyone. Take good care.
Thank you.
Oh, and are you gonna save this? People were asking.
How you click? It probably says.
You only get one chance. I don't know. I'm terrible at these things. Also.
I'm glad you said that.
I think it pops up.
I would be like, delete.
Yeah. So just so you know, something will pop up for you to save it to IGTV, and you hit it.
Do you click the X? I mean,
no.
You guys, stop saying Team Wolf in the comments, guys.
Someone help us.
Fucking do this. So if I click it, it should say.
I think you click the X and then it'll pop up and say save, and you get one chance to save it. So God bless.
Gen Z, we're millennials. Help us, please. Yeah. I'll talk to you soon. Okay. Thank you.
Lots of love. Bye.
Bye, love. Please, let's hope this works. Are you sure you want to end your live video? Oh crap, do I push end now? Will it save? Who am I talking to?